The fork never made it to my plate. I was reaching for the roasted carrots when Alicia's voice cut through the light clinking of glasses and soft laughter around the patio table. "Oh, please. We only let her stay out of pity. Not because we like her," she said, waving her wine glass toward me like I was part of the punchline. A few nervous chuckles followed. Her husband, Brad, gave one of those half-laughs men do when they're not sure if something's funny or cruel. No one looked at me. Not even the neighbors' people I'd baked for watered plants for when they traveled watched their kids play in this same backyard. I stayed completely still. Salad tongs in my hand. Smile fixed where it had been seconds earlier. The thing about humiliation is that it doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slow and quiet through the spaces left by people who should have spoken, but didn't. I looked across the table at Alicia. Her face was radiant in the afternoon sun eyes, bright, not even a flicker of discomfort. She didn't mean it as a slip. That was the joke. It wasn't even a secret. I sat back in my chair, feeling the heat settle at the base of my throat. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was startled. As if someone had opened a window in a room I didn't know I was locked inside. No one mentioned it again. The conversation moved on to real estate prices, a new yoga studio, Brad's fantasy football league. I passed the bread when asked. I even laughed once or twice at things I didn't hear. But when I cleared the dishes later, alone in the kitchen, I ran my finger slowly around the rim of a glass and thought, so this is how they see me. I didn't say anything that night. Not to Alicia. Not to Brad. Not to the children. But I noticed how the air in that house felt thinner than it did the day before. I wake before anyone else. I always do. I start the coffee slice fruit for the kids' lunchboxes and fold the laundry I switched over after everyone went to bed. No one asks me to. It's just what I do. I've always believed a clean kitchen and warm breakfast say more than words. By the time Alicia comes downstairs, I've already wiped the counters and fed the dog. She barely looks at me as she grabs her smoothie from the fridge. "Thanks," she says, "but it's to the blender, not to me." I take the twins to preschool 3 days a week. I pay half the grocery bill even though I only eat toast and coffee most days. I refill the paper towel holder. I tighten the loose knobs on the cabinets. Brad leaves his work shirts in a pile near the door. I hang them up. They don't ask. They don't say thank you. But they also don't say stop. At dinner, they talk about weekend plans, a concert downtown, a wine tasting with Brad's coworkers. I'm not mentioned. When I ask, should I keep the kids? Saturday night, Alicia just nods. Not because she's grateful. Because it's expected. The walls of this house are white and smooth and full of their things, photos of their vacations, paintings they bought together, a shelf of parenting books. There's no sign I live here. Nothing of mine. Not even in the guest bathroom. Guest. That's what I am, isn't it? Not a mother. Not a partner in this home. Just someone who keeps the fridge stocked and the towels folded and takes up too much space in the garage. When I try to suggest moving the couch to make more room, Brad says, "Let's keep things how they are, okay?" And then he turns the TV back up. I nod. And later that night, while scrubbing out a pan, no one else offered to wash. I think this isn't a home I live in. It's a house I orbit. That's when I remembered the call, the one that changed everything. It started with a phone call. Alicia was crying, really crying, not the kind she used when she wanted something. The twins were sick again. Brad was working late, the mortgage had just gone up, and she was at her wit's end. "Could you come stay for a while?" she asked. "Just until things settle down." I didn't hesitate. I told her I'd be there by the weekend. That night I walked through my antique shop alone, flipping off the lights one by one. Roswell Antiques had been mine for almost 20 years. It wasn't just furniture and clocks, it was memory care and 100 stories wrapped in lace and polished wood. But I knew it was time. Business had slowed, my hands ached more each winter, and here was my daughter asking for help. So I sold it, quietly. I didn't cry. I told myself I was doing something good, something that mattered more. When they found a house closer to Brad's work, I offered to help. Not out of guilt, not because they asked, but because I didn't want to be the woman living in her daughter's spare room with nothing to offer. I gave them nearly half of the down payment. "Let me stand on my own feet here," I'd said. Alicia had smiled. "Of course, Mom. You'll always have a place with us." My name didn't make it onto the title, just a paperwork mix-up, she said. I let it go. But I contacted my old lawyer anyway. Had my share legally recorded through a quiet agreement. 38%. Just enough to remind myself I hadn't vanished entirely. Back then, the house felt full of promise. I baked cinnamon muffins the first morning. Brad actually complimented my coffee. The twins fought over who got to sit in my lap. I believed we were building something together. But now, years later, I'm no longer sure if that phone call was about needing me or just what I could give. And what I overheard next would make that painfully clear. I was folding laundry when Ethan walked in, dragging his dinosaur pajama pants across the floor. He sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging, and asked in that soft, matter-of-fact voice, "Only a 6-year-old can get away with Grandma. Why do you live here if nobody likes you?" I didn't flinch. I smiled and said, "Who told you that?" He shrugged. "No one. Mommy just says you're always in the way." I nodded, slowly smoothed out a t-shirt, and told him to go wash up for dinner. My hands kept folding, but my chest felt hollow. Kids don't lie. They just repeat what they hear when the grown-ups think they've gone to bed. Later that night, as I passed by the half-closed door to the office, I heard Alicia on the phone. Her voice was low, tight. "No, she doesn't pay rent. She's not on anything. We're basically her caregivers at this point." A pause, then laughter. "It's exhausting." I didn't move. I just stood in the hallway, staring at the wall like it had something new to offer. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, my palms pressed flat against the blanket. I wasn't angry. I was erased. The next morning, I found one of the old notebooks I used at the shop, soft leather cover pages that smelled faintly of dust and cedar. I began writing again, not to lash out, not to record grievances, but to remind myself who I'd been before they started speaking of me like a burden. I wrote about the store, about my husband's laugh, about the time I taught Alicia how to polish a brass mirror without streaking it. I wrote until my fingers cramped. They could talk all they wanted, but I wouldn't forget. I closed the journal gently and placed it in the drawer beside my bed, right next to the folder I hadn't opened in years. But that night, something pulled me to it. It was late. The house had settled into that hushed rhythm that only comes after bedtime. Soft footsteps, a dishwasher humming in the dark, the distant clink of a glass in the kitchen. I was on my way back from brushing my teeth when I paused outside the office. The door wasn't fully closed. It never was. I heard Alicia's voice, tired but sharp. "I don't know. She won't be around much longer anyway." No one replied. Maybe she was on the phone. Maybe she was just saying it out loud to herself. Either way, it landed exactly the way she meant it to. I didn't move. I didn't gasp or cry or knock on the door like some scene in a drama. I simply turned and walked down the hall. Slowly, as if I was still deciding whether I'd misheard her. But I hadn't. Back in my room, I went to the drawer I always kept locked. The one no one ever asked about because no one cared what I kept. I pulled it open, slid the folders out, and sat at my desk. I unfolded the deed first. My name, plain as day, just beneath theirs. 38% ownership. Filed. Verified. Signed years ago when I still believed this was a shared life, not a shared roof. Next came the bank documents. The account I opened with the sale of my shop. The one Alicia never asked about. She just assumed it was gone, used, or left behind. But I had never touched most of it. just in case. They had spent years acting like I was lucky to be here, like I owed them comfort-compliant silence. But all this time, I had something they forgot. Proof. Proof that I hadn't been passive, that I hadn't given them everything without thinking, that even in love, I'd left myself a way out. I slipped the folders back into the drawer, locked it gently, and sat still for a long while, hands in my lap, breath calm. In the morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The office looked exactly as I remembered it, neat, cool, and smelling faintly of lemon oil and paper. Ms. Dorsey hadn't changed much either, much. Her hair was grayer, her glasses thicker, but her voice still carried that calm, deliberate tone that made people lean in when she spoke. "Are you ready for this, Lynette?" she asked, hands folded over the folder I'd brought. I nodded. I've been ready longer than I realized. We reviewed everything, deed account statements, the trust fund I'd quietly opened after selling the store. The plan was simple: open a private bank account in my name, only transfer what was left from the joint household bills into it, and set up a withdrawal schedule that would ensure I wouldn't leave myself vulnerable when I left. Because I would leave. That part no longer felt like a question. By noon, the paperwork was signed. Ms. Dorsey slid a thick envelope across the desk. "Keep this close. And if they push back, don't explain. Just hand this over and walk away." I placed it in my bag without flinching. That evening, I made my usual lemon chicken. Alicia said it was dry. Brad didn't look up from his phone. The twins bickered about who got the blue cup. I smiled. I passed the peas. I asked about their day, but something had changed. Every small act felt like a retrieval, as if I was collecting myself in pieces. I cleared the table and counted it as strength. I folded laundry and saw it as closure. I organized the junk drawer and thought, this will be the last time I ever do this for them. No one noticed the shift. Not even when I started taking longer walks or moved my things from the hallway closet back into my room. They just assumed I was fading into the background again. But I wasn't. I was getting ready. And the night before I left, I wrote the note they'd find on the kitchen table. I woke before the sky changed. The world outside was still dark, still quiet. No traffic, no voices, no little footsteps running across the upstairs hallway. It felt like the house was holding its breath. I made my coffee just the way I liked it. 1 scoop too strong, no sugar. The dog padded in from the mudroom and sat beside me as I buttered a piece of toast. I fed him scratched behind his ears and whispered goodbye. He wagged his tail once, then went back to his cushion without a sound. In my room, the suitcases waited by the door packed neatly 2 nights ago. Just the essentials, clothes, toiletries, a framed photo of my husband, and my journals. Everything else could be left behind. Nothing else in that house belonged to me anymore. I placed the envelope from Ms. Dorsey into the outer pocket of my bag. Not because I expected a fight, but because I knew how people act when they finally realize you've stopped waiting for them. Before leaving, I walked through the kitchen one last time. I straightened a chair, folded a dish towel. Then I took out a plain piece of paper and wrote the words without hesitation. Now it's my turn. No signature, no explanation. I left it in the center of the table right between the salt and pepper shakers. I closed the front door quietly behind me. The sun hadn't yet climbed over the trees, but the first hints of pink were beginning to stretch across the sky. I breathed in deep, crisp air, free air, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. No one knew I was gone. Not yet. But they would. And by the time they read that note, I would already be halfway across town, headed to the Keys and contract, waiting with my lawyer, ready to cash in what they always pretended I didn't own. Alicia called the next afternoon. I didn't answer. An hour later, she texted, "Mom, did you go somewhere? We found your note. Are you okay?" I turned the phone over and let the screen go black. By sunset, the messages changed tone. More clipped. Why is our bank account frozen? Why would you do that without saying anything? Then Brad's name popped up on caller ID. I ignored that too. By the second day, the letter from Ms. Dorsey would have arrived certified, stamped, undeniable. It outlined my intent to sell my legally recorded 38% share of the house. They had 60 days to either buy me out or prepare for a sale. That's what a balloon clause does. It builds quietly, then bursts all at once. They hadn't read the fine print, but I had. I imagined Alicia pacing the kitchen, holding the envelope in one hand, my note in the other, searching for a version of me who wouldn't do something like this. But that version was the one they'd slowly erased. Piece by piece, meal by meal, silence by silence. And now they'd have to face the numbers. The mortgage was tight, even with my help. Without it, they couldn't float the payments. Not with Brad's spotty commissions and Alicia's part-time hours. They'd lived like the house was theirs alone. But the documents disagreed. I didn't want their house. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the part of myself I'd left behind in their hallway, folded beneath clean towels and silent dinners. The last text I opened was from Alicia that evening. Just 4 words. We need to talk. I stared at it, then tapped my phone off again. I didn't know them words. Not anymore. That night, I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching headlights stretch across the ridge, and finally let myself imagine a life where I didn't have to ask permission to be seen. The first morning in my new place, I didn't set an alarm. I let the light wake me soft and gold, spilling over the hardwood floors and through the thin white curtains I'd picked out myself. No voices, no footsteps above my head. Just the quiet breath of space that was mine and mine alone. My condo isn't large, but it's enough. 2 bedrooms, 1 for me, 1 for the things I'd held on to. My books, my husband's jacket. A vase I'd wrapped in 3 towels during the move, even though it wasn't worth anything except to me. The view faces the Blue Ridge Mountains. Every evening the sky turns to fire, and I sit with a cup of coffee and let the silence fill the places where bitterness used to settle. I don't think of what they're doing back at the house. I don't wonder if they miss me. I know what they miss, and it was never me. I joined a book club at the library. They meet on Thursdays and bring cookies someone actually baked, not bought. I reopened a little vintage stall at the Saturday market, just a table and a few pieces. I'd saved the kind that still hold stories in their grain. One woman came back 3 weeks in a row just to hear where the items came from. She said, "You're good at this." And I believed her. People say my name now. They look me in the eye when I speak. They ask what I think about books about life, about the best way to clean old brass without scratching the finish. I say what I want. I go where I please. There's no one waiting to roll their eyes or dismiss my voice with a sigh. It's a small life, but it's solid. Mine. And then one evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long gold shadows across my living room, the phone rang again. This time I picked it up. The voice on the other end of the line was thin, like it had already run out of pride. Mom Alicia said, We're trying to figure things out. We can't make the next mortgage payment without you." I didn't want it to get to this point, but we need help. Not sorry. Not even surprised. Just need that same thread she'd always tugged when she wanted something. Not love, not presence, just utility. I let the silence stretch. Let her sit in it. She started again, filling the space. Brad's commission fell through. The kids are asking where you went. And I know things got tense, but can we just talk about it? I could hear clattering in the background. A door slamming. A child crying. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel powerful. I felt clear. "You had a mother," I said. "You chose a servant. I won't be either anymore. There was no gasp, just breathing, just stillness. Then the line went quiet, and I ended the call before she could recover into argument or guilt. I set the phone on the counter and stepped outside. The evening air was cool against my skin. The porch boards creaked softly beneath my feet. I leaned against the railing, coffee still warm in my hand, and watched the sky melt into soft purples and peach. The mountains held steady in the distance, unmoved by whatever storms people made below. I breathed in. No one needed anything from me here. No one looked through me, or spoke for me, or measured my value in favors. This porch, this view, this breath was mine. I had no intention of going back. Not to the house. Not to the silence. Not to the place where I had been slowly erased one chore at a time. Inside, my vintage clock ticked gently on the mantel. I had nowhere to be, nothing to prove. No one to explain myself to. Just the world ahead and finally room to live in it.